give me some of the phases in software testing life cycle?
So when software development process starts, it starts with requirement collection, right? So after requirement collection and everything has been done, coding part has been done, and then the executable package, the developer gave it to the testers, right? So the testing process goes like this. I mean, we have to understand the requirement first, what the client wants. Then we have to make a test plan according to it. Test plan could contain the scope of testing. I mean, which areas to be tested and which area are not to be tested. Like that, then test approach should be there, and what testing methodology should we follow. So covering that up in test plan should be made after requirement, after understanding the requirement. Then after the test plan has been made, then we directly go for test case, writing the test cases. So test case can be written first according to the requirement. We have some scenarios. We have to write down the test scenarios first, and according to each test scenario, we have to derive some test cases around it. And then we have to check the coverage of test cases, whether every requirement has covered by writing test cases or not. So in order to do that, we have to make a testability matrix, which helps us to cross check whether every requirement is covered or not. So after then we have to get approval from our test lead whether the test cases are valid, logically valid or not. So after that, we can directly go for the test case execution on the working side that we have in our company, any company. Then there, suppose any defects we found. Defect means if some functionalities are not working as per the requirement, then that is defect. So we found any defect, then we have to report that to the developer, to the respected developer. They will look into it. They will give a fix. After they give a fix, then we have to again retest it to make sure that the functionality is working fine. Then after all of things has to be done, then we need to submit the test report. I mean, nowadays in Jira, we don't need to document everything. So after that, we have at the end of every sprint, I mean, in the agile methodology, every sprint, and then we have a retrospective meeting in which we discuss all of these things, what went well and what improvement can we make in the upcoming sprint that we discuss in that meeting. So this is how it goes.
Right. Yeah. So you have covered overall, like test life cycle very well. Couple of things that are specific to project. So like reviewing your test cases with the test lead that you have mentioned. It could be test lead. It could be your peer person or other team member. So it depends which project, but either ways, it's fine. Your answer is absolutely fine. And I'll come to the Jira and Agile part. So you have worked in Agile, or you have exposure to Agile. I would say you have exposure to Agile, you have exposure to Jira. So we'll come to those questions as well. All right. So absolutely correct. I mean, you have covered all the phases there, and you know what happens in those phases. So that's absolutely fine. Can you name, can you explain what exactly is functional testing with examples? So give me some example of functional testing.
Yes, exactly. So functional testing, see, whenever developer makes an executable file, right, we cannot see the internal piece of code, which we call as black box testing. Then we go for the first smoke testing. We have to go for smoke testing because we have to make sure that the application is stable, the application is opening, the basic functionality, basic flow of the application should work. Smoke testing we do for the first time, right? So to give an example, like practical example, I can give you, like whenever we cook a dish, right? Suppose we cook chicken. Then after following each and every recipe, after the 70-80% of the chicken has been cooked, so we have to test like whether the chicken is boiled or not. That is our first requirement. So that is smoke testing. So after getting a confirmation that the chicken is boiled, then we go for the extra like testing, like the salt is adequate or not, the spices, right? So if that we can call as functional testing. Suppose we found that the salt is less, then that is a bug. And we have to again add some the required salt we have to add. So again we have to test. That means we have to retest the new functionalities we have added. So like that it goes. Functional, yes. So So functional testings like it can also be called as component testing. Like we have to test each and every component of an application. Like suppose we have a home page, then there we can have the header link, then the login functionality, the sign up functionality, the footer
Mhm.
link. Then after logging into the application, the home page should be displayed like this. Suppose this is a Facebook application. Suppose a Facebook application, I'm taking an example as.
Mhm.
Then after logging in, we should be able to see the message. We have to we should be able to send a friend request to our friends. Like that, the flow should work. So each and every
Right.
component we should test. So that is known as functional test.
Right. So functional, I mean, you have given the example correctly. Only one correction there. Function. Do not tie up this functional testing with component testing. Like unit testing is sort of a part of it, you can say, but functional testing is more broader, right? So like you test the functionality, and functionality
Yes.
could be tested at the unit level, integration level, system level.
Okay.
um,
Mm-hmm.
so all of that comes into the functional testing. So say,
Okay.
for example, you took the example of login, right? Login to Facebook
Mm.
application, sending the friend request. So you are basically testing the overall functionality of that application, that you are able to send the request, and that's one of the functionality of the application, right? So
Yes.
that's what the functional testing is, and your understanding is correct. Just little bit refinement, but your understanding around functional testing, and the example that you provided for the smoke, that when the initial build you got,
Yes.
right, you do a bit of quick smoke test to
Yeah.
ensure that the build is good enough to go ahead to do further testing on it, right?
Perfect.
So
Right.
it doesn't break immediately, right? So say, for
Immediately.
example, you are testing an application, and the application has been installed in the test environment, and you launch it and you are not able to launch it, then how could you proceed further with the testing, right?
Yes.
So that's
Exactly.
what that you have already covered as smoke. So absolutely fine. Now, what is early testing, and why do we need
Early
to
testing.
yeah.
Yes. Yes. It is one of the principle of software testing. That means we have to start testing at the earliest stage. I
Mhm.
mean, we have to start testing from the requirement. Whenever the requirement comes into picture, then we have to start verifications, various requirements like customer requirement, and then software requirement, then functional requirement. We have to verify all that. So this is just to make sure that we are building the right product. Before that, we have to do all of this verification. So,
Absolutely, yes. So it's a principle and it's a practice, right? You
yeah.
should, like, start the testing as early as possible, right? And can you give me maybe, some drawbacks that we used to have in previous development approaches, like waterfall, and
Mm.
why did waterfall was not a good, what were the drawbacks in that
Mm.
approach?
See, in waterfall, what happens is that after requirement is freezed, and we move further for the feasibility study, then we
Hmm.
cannot just go back to change. If there is any requirement, I mean, there is a need to change the requirement. We
Hmm.
cannot do that. So if we don't verify the requirement at that point, if a bug is present in that point, then it will be carried forward to the I mean to the end of the software development process. So it will be, I mean, the cost would be very more if we have to start from the right from the beginning if we want to avoid the bug. So that is the major drawback why we don't use waterfall method.
Right. And similar lines, right? Like you mentioned that you can't go back and change the requirement. You can, but the cost becomes really high, right?
Cost will be, yes.
And
Yeah.
early testing was not the key aspect in the waterfall model,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? So
It is.
after one phase got over, requirement gathering and analysis got over, then it used to move to next phase, design, then development, and testing used to come later. So
Testing.
by the
Later,
time,
yes.
if requirement, like you mentioned, if requirement defect was there, by the time it went to the coding and testing, it has to go back to the requirement if it is a requirement defect, and cost becomes
Yes.
really high. So that was,
Yeah.
the reason why early testing principle, um, is being established, and that's where new development approaches like V model and now Agile Scrum
Agile.
came in picture, right? Great. So absolutely fantastic answer.